My brother is mid-laugh when my phone vibrates against the mahogany desk. $470,000. Completed. The notification stares at me like a confession I wasn't supposed to see. My hands go cold. Not from shock, from clarity. I watch him across the conference room, accepting congratulations from our parents like he'd just closed a major deal. Like he'd earned something. Like this was normal. My name is Sienna Walsh, and I'm 32 years old. For the last 8 years, I've managed every dollar that flows through Walsh Family Enterprises. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every single one requires my authorization code. Except this one. My father claps my brother on the shoulder. My mother beams like she's watching her favorite son accomplish something remarkable. No one looks at me. No one asks how this happened. No one seems to notice that the money they're celebrating didn't come from thin air. Came from the operating account I control. This is exactly what the business needed, my father says. His voice filled with pride I haven't heard directed at me in months. Dominic finally understands growth. Keep my face neutral. I've learned that expressions betray you faster than words ever could. But inside something shifts. A clarity that feels almost dangerous. Because there's only one way that transfer went through without my approval. Someone used my credentials. 2 weeks earlier they asked me to step back. For your health, my mother said gently. You've been stressed. The business is fine without you for a while. Just a temporary arrangement. I remember standing in that kitchen, holding a coffee mug, watching her face arrange itself into something that looked like concern but felt like a rehearsed line. My father was already at the office. Dominic was in Denver closing some important deal. It was just her and me, and the sound of my own breathing felt too loud. How long is temporary? He asked. A month. Maybe 2. Family first, Sienna. You know that. I nodded because I knew exactly what she meant. Family first meant my needs came second. Family first meant trusting people who'd already proven they couldn't be trusted. But I said yes anyway because that's what people in families do. They say yes even when every instinct screams no. I agreed to step back. I didn't authorize the transfer. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and pulled up my emails. There were 17 messages I hadn't seen. 17 conversations happening without me. I scrolled through them slowly, my eyes catching on fragments. Sienna won't notice, and she's too distracted to focus, and worst of all, we can move the money before she comes back. But the part that made my stomach drop was this. Someone had replicated my authorization code. Not guessed it. They'd mimicked it perfectly enough to pass the automated system. The banks didn't flag it as suspicious because it looked legitimate. I found an old draft of the operating agreement on my desktop, buried under files from 2019. A document I'd written myself when I was younger, more trusting, more naive. My hands trembled as I read my own words, the clauses I'd carefully inserted, the safeguards I'd thought were foolproof. Safeguards that apparently weren't safe at all. The family meeting happened on a Tuesday in my mother's dining room. Not at the office. Never at the office. That should have been my first warning. My brother sat at the head of the table, my seat, and announced that I'd approved the entire transaction. That we'd discussed it. That I'd encouraged him to take the money and invest it in expansion. Sienna signed off on everything, he said smoothly, sliding a document across the table. His signature was beneath mine. Except it wasn't my signature. I felt my jaw tighten. My fingers curled into fists under the table. But I didn't interrupt. I let the lie land in the room like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. I watched my parents' faces relax as they absorbed his words. Watched them believe him because believing him was easier than questioning their own son. This is wonderful news, my father said, reaching over to pat Dominic's hand. Sienna would be proud of you. Sienna is right here, I thought. But I said nothing. My mother smiled at me. A real smile, not a rehearsed one. Proud. Relieved. I'm so glad you're supporting your brother in this, Sienna. This is exactly what family means. I understood in that moment what was happening. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was orchestrated, planned, discussed in every meeting I wasn't invited to, every phone call I wasn't included on. They needed me absent so they could rewrite the story with me as the supporting character. The helper. The enabler. Not the one being betrayed. I excused myself early, saying I had work to do. As I gathered my things, I caught Dominic's eye. He looked confident, untouchable, like he'd already won. That's when I decided to request the certified transaction records. Not aggressively, just a casual ask, buried in an email about quarterly reports. I didn't explain why. Didn't hint at suspicion. Just asked. And when those records arrived, everything would change. That night, I pulled out the original operating agreement, the one I'd written in 2016, when I was fresh out of business school and still believed that clear language and careful planning could prevent disaster. I was naive. But I was also thorough. Buried in Section 7, subsection C, was a clause I'd insisted on despite my father's resistance. A performance-based withdrawal condition that tied any large transaction to specific benchmarks, growth targets, revenue goals, quarterly reviews. The clause was crystal clear. No distribution exceeding $250,000 shall be processed without documented evidence of meeting established performance metrics. And Dominic had never met those benchmarks. Not in 2021. Not in 2022. Not in 2023. I had 8 years of quarterly reports that proved it. His division consistently underperformed. His ideas didn't materialize. His promises turned into excuses. I printed the agreement, highlighted the clause in yellow, and read it 12 times to make sure I wasn't misremembering. 12 times to make sure I wasn't overreacting. The words stayed the same. I called our family accountant the next morning. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "What can I do for you?" he asked. I asked him one simple question. How was Dominic authorized to withdraw $470,000 last month? The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds I heard everything. That's not how we interpreted the agreement," he finally said. Interpreted. Not followed. Not complied with. I noted the tremor in his voice and scheduled a private consultation with a corporate attorney for the following week. I met with the attorney in her downtown office, a woman named Samantha Pierce who specialized in corporate fraud and fiduciary duty cases. I brought copies of everything. The operating agreement, the transaction records, the emails they'd forgotten I could access, the forged signature. She sat behind a glass desk and read through the documentation slowly. Once, then again, then a third time, her eyes tracking the same lines like she was looking for something that might have changed. "Did you approve this withdrawal?" she finally asked. "No." She set the papers down and looked at me directly. "Then someone committed fraud. Multiple people, actually. Your brother forged your signature. Your accountant falsified records. Your parents either participated or chose not to look too closely at what they didn't want to see." My chest felt tight. Hearing it said out loud, fraud not mistake, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "What are my options?" asked. Samantha leaned back in her chair. "You have 2 paths. First, demand immediate repayment with legal action. Go aggressive. Expose them publicly. Recover the money, but destroy the family in the process. And the second, you take control. Quietly. You let them think they've won while you systematically document everything. You wait for him to make mistakes, and he will because arrogant people always do. Then you move when they're vulnerable, when they can't hide, when the fallout is undeniable." He paused, watching me. "The first option gives you money. The second gives you justice. What do you want?" I thought about my brother's confident smile, about my parents' relieved faces, about being told I needed to step back for my health, about the lie they'd told so easily. "I want control," I said quietly. Samantha smiled. "Then we wait. And we prepare." Samantha explained the strategy like a chess match. Each move carefully calculated. Each piece positioned. "Your brother will spend the money," she said. "Men like him always do. They believe they've gotten away with it, so they spend like it's limitless. Every purchase creates a paper trail. Every commitment generates documentation. Greed is your best tool." She was right. Within days, Dominic announced a business expansion. A new satellite office. 12 new hires. A lease on a second floor in the building downtown. $470,000 spent like it belonged to him. Like it grew on trees instead of coming from years of my careful management. Samantha advised me to wait, to gather evidence, to let the situation mature until the moment was absolutely perfect. "Don't move too early," she warned. "Let him believe he's untouchable. Let him get comfortable with his deception. Arrogance is a weapon that works best when your opponent doesn't see it coming." So I waited. And while I waited, my brother started talking about the expansion like he'd built it from nothing. Like the money had come from his own vision and work. He gave presentations to investors. He took credit for growth that wouldn't exist without the $470,000. The arrogance was almost beautiful, in its own terrible way. Like watching someone build a house on sand and believing it would stand forever. 2 months after the transfer, Dominic held a press conference announcing the expansion. I watched from the back of the room as he described his vision for growth, his leadership, his commitment to the company's future. He was good at it, commanding, confident, believable. He told the story so well that even I half believed it for a moment. Then he made a mistake. He mentioned the new office location, the lease agreement, the timeline. All specific details that I could verify. All facts that existed in documents with signatures and dates. After the conference, I requested copies of the lease agreement. Just a routine ask. Just housekeeping. The lease was signed by Dominic, using the wrong authority level. A signature that looked almost like his, but wasn't quite. A date that contradicted emails about when the lease was actually negotiated. Another forgery. Another lie. I forwarded everything to Samantha with a simple note. "He's still forging documents." She replied within an hour. "Perfect. He's creating evidence of ongoing fraud, not a one-time mistake. That changes everything." Meanwhile, Dominic was expanding hiring, committing the company to salary obligations, leasing office space that suddenly cost $80,000 per month. He was building an empire on borrowed authority, and every brick was documented. I could have stopped him at any point. Could have called the bank. Could have walked into a board meeting and exposed everything. Instead, I attended company events and smiled. I attended family dinners and listened. I let him talk about his plans, his dreams, his vision for the business's future. And with every word, every commitment, every signature, he was digging deeper into a hole that was becoming impossible to climb out of. I received an internal email I wasn't supposed to see. Dominic had forgotten to remove me from the distribution list on a message to the new office manager. A casual email about expense reports, staffing decisions, expansion timelines. Nothing explosive on its surface. But buried in the middle was this line. "Sienna won't challenge this. She's always been the type to let family handle things quietly." I read it maybe 20 times. Not "Sienna doesn't know," which would have made sense. But "Sienna won't challenge," which meant he knew I knew. He believed I was weak enough, family loyal enough, obligated enough to let this happen. He thought my love of family would paralyze me. He thought I'd choose keeping the peace over demanding justice. He believed I would sacrifice myself rather than sacrifice him. I forwarded the email to Samantha with the subject line, "This one's personal." She called me within minutes. "Do you want to end this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But not yet." I returned to the office. Quietly, helpfully, agreeably. I attended meetings and took notes. I smiled at board discussions about the expansion. I offered suggestions for the new office that were genuinely good ideas, because being helpful was part of the plan. I needed them to believe I'd accepted my demotion. "You seem better," my mother said at a family dinner. More like yourself. I was being someone other than myself. But she couldn't tell the difference. My father asked me to co-sign a loan for the expansion. A significant loan, $300,000, to cover operational costs while revenue ramped up. He asked like I was doing him a favor. Like he hadn't stolen from me. I declined politely. I'm being careful with my signature right now, I said smoothly. The business has some inconsistencies I'd like to audit first. I watched his face shift. Watched him process the threat hidden inside my polite refusal. He didn't like it, but he couldn't argue without revealing what he already knew. He'd stolen from me, and I just reminded him that I was aware. The bank contacted me directly about the signature inconsistencies on the lease agreement. Standard procedure, they said. Just needed clarification on authorization levels. My brother signed the documents wrong. Used the wrong authority level. Used the wrong date. The bank flagged it. The internal audit was triggered automatically. No accusations. Just procedure. Standard verification of all transactions over $250,000 in the last fiscal year. My brother was furious when he found out. He called me directly. His voice sharp and angry in a way I'd never heard before. What did you do? He demanded. I don't know what you mean, I said calmly. You triggered the audit. I know you did. Why would you do this to family? I didn't do anything, I replied. I just maintained standard protocols. That's my job. He started to say something else, but I hung up. The auditor requested a formal interview with me the following week. I arrived at the audit meeting early, dressed professionally, carrying a folder organized by date and amount. I looked like someone who had nothing to hide. The auditor was a woman named Christine, maybe 55, with tired eyes that had seen plenty of corporate fraud. She settled into her chair and opened her notebook. I'm reviewing a significant withdrawal from operating funds, she began. Can you walk me through the authorization process? I opened my folder and slid documentation across the desk. Transaction records, authorization logs, the operating agreement, email chains showing every step of the process that should have been followed. Here's what should have happened, I explained. And here's what actually happened. I showed her the clause that required performance benchmarks. I showed her that Dominic didn't meet them. I showed her the forged signature. The wrong authority level. The timeline of events that didn't match the story my brother had told. Christine's pen moved faster as I talked. Her eyes got sharper. Her posture shifted from bored routine to acute attention. And you didn't authorize this? She asked. No, I said. I was told to step back from the business. While I was away, someone used credentials similar to mine to process the transfer. It took me a few weeks to discover what happened, but the documentation is clear. Christine leaned back and studied me. You're not emotional about this. Oh, I'm emotional, I corrected. Just not here. Being emotional won't recover the money or prevent it from happening again. She nodded like I'd passed some kind of test. We're going to need to expand this audit, she said finally. Look at other transactions, other authorizations. Other inconsistencies. I'd been waiting to hear those words. The account was frozen within 48 hours. Not my personal accounts. The operating account. The business account. The one Dominic was counting on to pay the new employees he'd hired with money. He didn't have the right to spend. My brother couldn't access payroll. My father couldn't authorize new expenses. The expansion halted mid-construction because the contractor didn't get paid. And suddenly everyone was calling me. My mother called first, her voice high and panicked. Sienna, what's happening? Why is the account frozen? It's part of the audit, I said. Standard procedure. But the expansion is on hold, I finished. Until the audit is complete. My father called next. His tone was different. Not angry. Not yet. But approaching it. You need to fix this immediately. The board is concerned. We have commitments. I can't fix an audit, I said. I can only cooperate with it. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Not without admitting what he'd already done. The pressure started immediately. Family dinners where everyone was tense. Texts from my mother asking if I could just talk to someone about unfreezing the account. Comments from my father about how disappointing it was that I wasn't being a team player. I didn't answer the calls. I didn't attend the dinners. I went to work and did my job and waited for the next phase. The auditor's preliminary report recommended a recovery action. $470,000. Immediate repayment. Failure to comply within 30 days would trigger personal liability for my brother. Meaning legal action, potential criminal charges, garnishment of personal assets. The letter arrived at the office on a Thursday afternoon. My brother opened it. His face went white. He went to my father. My father went to our lawyer. But there was nothing to argue about. The documentation was too clear. The clause was too explicit. The fraud was too well documented. My brother didn't have the money anymore. It was spent. Invested in expansion he wasn't authorized to execute, using funds he wasn't authorized to access. He'd committed fraud and then spent the evidence. He requested a private meeting with me. He met me in a coffee shop, not at the office. Not at home. Somewhere neutral where he probably thought I'd be less likely to press my advantage. He looked different. Muller. The confidence had drained out of him. He was wearing the same suit he'd worn to the press conference, but now it hung on him like borrowed clothes. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I made a mistake. Bad decision. But it was a mistake, not. I didn't mean to hurt you." I listened without responding. Let him spiral alone. "The expansion was a good idea," he continued. "It's still a good idea. But I should have followed the right process. Should have discussed it with you. I was just trying to build something and I didn't think." "You didn't think," I repeated. "Or you thought I wouldn't notice." "I thought you would understand that it was for the family," he said. "That family comes first." "Family comes first," I echoed. Interesting interpretation of family. The kind where you steal money and forge signatures. He flinched. "It wasn't stealing. The money was in the family account. It was already ours. It was trust," I said quietly. "I had authorization. You had credibility because you were my brother. And you both broke that. Can you fix this?" he asked. His voice was small. I slid a single document across the table. The document was a summary of personal guarantees he'd made on the expansion lease. Binding commitments. Financial obligations that couldn't be undone without massive penalties. And a clear statement of liability. Breach of fiduciary duty, unauthorized use of corporate funds, fraud. "What is this?" he whispered. "Your options," I said. "You either work with a recovery plan, sell assets, liquidate the expansion, repay everything, or we proceed with criminal charges. Your choice." He went silent. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to find the right words to convince me that none of this was real. But it was real. It was all documented. All legal. All absolutely, undeniably real. "I can't pay it back," he finally said. "I don't have the money." "I know," I replied. "Which is why you're going to resign, effective immediately, and we're going to sell your personal assets to cover the outstanding balance. The house you just bought. Cars. Whatever it takes. You can't force me to do that." "No," I agreed. "But the court will." I stood up and left him sitting there, staring at that document like it was a death sentence. My brother didn't resign voluntarily, so the board voted to remove him. The vote was unanimous. My father abstained, which was his way of saying he'd known the entire time. My mother didn't attend the meeting. She claimed she was sick, but I knew the truth. She couldn't face what her son had done. Dominic's division was dismantled. His hired staff was let go. The expansion lease was terminated, triggering $80,000 in penalties. His equipment was liquidated. Everything he'd built with stolen money collapsed in less than 2 weeks. He attempted to negotiate a settlement, offering partial repayment if I'd agreed to stop the legal action. But Samantha had already filed. The machinery was in motion. Stopping it would require action, not inaction. The recovery process took months. Assets were sold. His house went on the market. His cars were repossessed. A lien was placed on his personal retirement accounts. He was erased from the company, literally and figuratively. His office was cleaned out. His email was deactivated. His name was removed from the website. It was like he'd never existed at all. With my brother gone, the business needed direction. The board voted to reinstate me as managing partner with full authority and control. Not as help, not as support, but as the decision-maker, the final authority. The vote was unanimous again. My father actually looked at me this time. Not with shame exactly, but with a kind of grudging respect. The respect you develop for someone who's stronger than you. I accepted the position without comment. My parents showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. I almost didn't let them in, but some part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in family, opened the door. They looked older, smaller, like the last few months had hollowed them out from the inside. "He's gone," my mother said. No preamble, no greeting. Just that statement, dropped in my entryway like a confession. "I know," I replied. "He's staying with a friend. He lost the house. He lost his car. He can barely," her voice broke. "He's your brother." "He's my brother," I agreed. "And he committed fraud. And he got caught. And now he's facing consequences." "We raised you better than this," my father said, and something in his voice made my blood boil. "You raised me to be smart," I said coldly. "Smart enough to protect myself. Smart enough not to trust blindly. Smart enough to hold people accountable when they betray me. If you consider that a poor reflection on your parenting, that's your problem." My mother started to cry. "I have one question," I continued. "And I want a real answer. Not an explanation. Not an excuse. Just the truth. Did you know? When you asked me to step back, did you know what he was going to do?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "No," my father said finally. "But I suspected." That was the moment I understood that forgiveness wasn't the end goal. Accountability was. "Get out," I said quietly. "I'll call you when I'm ready to talk." They left without arguing. I spent the next month undoing the damage. Repairing relationships with investors. Restructuring the expansion to something sustainable. Rebuilding the departments my brother had disrupted. Implementing new authorization protocols so something like this couldn't happen again. The business was stronger when I was done. More organized. More resilient. My brother sent me an email asking if I could lend him $15,000 for living expenses while he figured out his next move. I didn't respond. Samantha advised against any contact. She was right. Anything I said would either be weaponized or used as justification for why I owed him something. Instead, I documented the email and moved forward. I stood in my office, looking at the city lights stretching below me. 8 months had passed since that first notification. $470,000. Completed. 8 months since I'd realized that family is sometimes the greatest risk we take. 8 months of planning, documenting, executing, and watching someone I'd grown up with lose everything he believed he'd stolen. My brother had assumed I wouldn't defend myself because I was taught not to. Because family loyalty was supposed to override personal survival. Because women, especially younger sisters, were supposed to smooth things over through sacrifice and silence. He'd misread me. The truth is, I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't demand immediate justice. I just documented everything, waited for the right moment, and let his own arrogance dismantle him. That's the real lesson. People don't lose everything because you attack them. They lose it because they assume you won't defend yourself. They lose it because they believe the lie they've told themselves about who you are. My brother believed I was weak. That belief cost him everything. I changed the operating agreement again, adding layers of authorization requirements. No single person could access funds over $100,000. No large transactions without board verification. No flexibility for family considerations. The business was mine now, fully and completely. Not as a gift, not as a burden, but as something I'd earned through intelligence and survival. My parents came back after 3 weeks of silence. They asked for forgiveness, asked if they could help rebuild, asked if we could move past this and be a family again. I said yes to some things and no to others. I was civil but distant. I was their daughter but not their puppet. I was family but on my terms. They didn't like it, but they accepted it because the alternative was losing me entirely. My brother tried to file for bankruptcy to escape the personal guarantees. The court denied it because the debt stemmed from fraud, not misfortune. He couldn't wash away consequences through legal loopholes. He eventually took a job at a hotel chain in another state. Started over. Rebuilt. Tried to disappear into a new life where people didn't know about the fraud or the betrayal. I let him go without interference. He'd learned his lesson through loss, the most effective teacher there is. With clean authority structures and clear protocols, the business thrived. Revenue increased. New investors approached. Expansion opportunities materialized, legitimate ones, authorized ones, profitable ones. I became known in business circles as someone ruthless and fair. Someone who protected the company's interests without hesitation. Someone who couldn't be manipulated through family loyalty. It was a reputation I'd earned the hard way. I stood in my office late one evening going through old files. I found the original email Dominic had sent, the one where he admitted the benchmarks weren't met but believed I wouldn't challenge family. I'd printed it and kept it in a folder marked, Lessons Learned. I read it one more time then shredded it. I didn't need to carry that with me anymore. The lesson was already integrated into who I'd become. A year after the audit began, I had a final conversation with Samantha, my attorney. "He's settled everything," she reported. "House sold. Car's gone. Retirement accounts liquidated. He's living in a modest apartment, working a job that pays around $50,000 a year. He's starting from zero. And psychologically, yes, devastated, humiliated, changed. Whether that makes him a better person or just a cautious one, I couldn't say." He nodded. "That wasn't really my concern anymore." I walked out of my office as the sun set over the city, and I felt lighter, not from vindication but from clarity. I hadn't destroyed my brother because I'm cruel. I'd held him accountable because I'm intelligent. I'd protected my business because I'm responsible. I'd moved past it because I'm resilient. The moral isn't about revenge. It's about survival. People will take from you until you make it clear that the cost of taking is higher than the benefit of stealing. They'll lie to you until you document the truth so clearly that lies become impossible. They'll dismiss you until you demonstrate that your value is non-negotiable. My brother taught me that family is not a shield against consequences. It's not an excuse to betray someone. And it's definitely not a reason to sacrifice yourself. I didn't scream. I didn't expose him publicly. I didn't seek revenge in the way revenge is usually understood. I simply let arrogance finish what betrayal started, and I watched the dominoes fall in logical order. That's the real power, not in the explosion but in the precision.